I was one of the first to have children in my group of friends. So apart from my mother, I'm the oldest of 5, so she gave me lots of advice, but I kind of felt it was out of date. So I got lots of... Sorry, Mum. You know, like you are with your mum. Yeah, Mum, that was in your time. I'm having my children now. So I went to Google and books. What to expect when you're expecting was like my favourite book at the time.
The best place to go to.
Yes.
When the children were actually born, though, did you suddenly get into panic mode, or were you fairly calm?
You know, my first child was like an angel. He never cried. I didn't hear him cry till he was old enough to hurt himself. He was like this honestly perfect little child. I was like, I don't know what all the fuss is about. Everyone's like stressing and late nights. I'm like, what is the problem? And then I had my second child.
And then you realised...
And he came out crying and didn't stop crying for about 3 years. I'm like, okay, this is what the fuss is about. Yeah, so I had 2 very different experiences with my boys.
Tania, you've got 2 lovely little adopted boys. Now, for a lot of people, they think, 2 adopted boys. I mean, quite a lot of energy, I can imagine. But did you ever cross your mind, actually, how can I love children who are not biologically mine?
Actually, no, it didn't. But that's partly because I'd been a foster carer before I adopted. And I realised that I just had this... I would say God-given capacity just to love and to laugh and to get in there with children and teenagers. And I have to say, probably if anything, it sort of it enables me to love them probably in a deeper, more committed sense of the word, because I know that they're vulnerable. Now, I haven't had my own biological kids, so, you know, I can't gauge, therefore, that kind of, different love factor. But for me, the minute my boys landed, via social services in little car seats, one was 7 days old, one was 13 months, and I looked at both of them, both with real needs and backgrounds and stories and history, and I melted. And I just couldn't stop kissing the little baby's nose and eyelashes, and he was really struggling with detoxing and withdrawals and shakes, and it was hard to feed him because he'd be sick after having, shaking after having a bottle and what have you. But it just made my heart massive towards them. So I've never had to struggle with any sort of bonding issues. It's just felt very, very natural.
Bekah, for you, with your children, did this kind of maternal instinct just kick in? You just sort of knew what to do?
Well, my voice has disappeared there. I shall find it and bring it back.
You're so emotional.
Yes. Just get carried away with emotion. No. Do you know what? For me, I was very fortunate. It did. I was terrified it wouldn't. I was having nightmares all the way through my first pregnancy. And in my nightmares, I put my baby in a drawer and closed the drawer. And the nightmare wasn't that I'd put the baby in the drawer. It was like my mum found out. So I think I was riven with fear that I would get it wrong and that I wouldn't know what I was doing. But actually, when she pitched up, in full traumatic birth and everything, I could forgive her for the traumatic birth, which is a miracle in itself, wow. I do think. But no, I just loved her. But I was very fortunate in some respects. I actually... For one reason and another, I actually lived abroad at the time, but I'd flown to England to have my baby. And so when Gemma was born, I stayed with my mum for a month. So I got all that. I had so much support on hand. It was astonishing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
really
it's amazing
helpful.
You had all of that support around. Because I think that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we can all go through these kind of phases and stages with our children. We need different support at different times. Arianna, you've got teenagers, and a lot of people sort of have this image in their mind. It's a nightmare when you get to teenage years. You can't relate to your children. Have there been some challenges for you?
You know what? I almost hesitate to say this, but I love teenagers. I think they're exciting and fun, and they're full of questions. And I would say what I've said to a lot of my younger friends who have children is, if you put the hard work in when they're little, if you put the foundations down, if you have open communication, you build and treat them like people, not just, kids, and you put all that in, there's always going to be challenges and difficulties, but there's a bond and there's a open communication and respect for each other that carries you right through the challenges. So I would definitely say, stick with it in the terrible twos and stick with your boundaries and follow through and have great communication, and it does pay off when they hit the teenage years. That's right.
I'm so listening to this
I
right
can
now.
see you there, Tan. I can see that you were eagerly thinking, right, I've got to get it sorted
It's
now in the
true,
terrible
though.
twos. I mean, we say the terrible twos, but a lovely age as well. I mean, do they make you giggle and smile and laugh as well?
Yeah, they do, and they have taught me so much. I mean, when they both first arrived, I mean, I had never changed a nappy, let alone make milk formula or sterilise a bottle, or so. And there I was, literally with two very vulnerable kids in stereo. And so, I had to learn everything on the hoof, and that has not stopped. So they're now 2 and 3, and I'm still just learning from them almost as to what their needs are. And then obviously, as we're just talking, I lean in on women, and I lean in on people. I am not afraid to ask hard questions. I all the time am saying, what do you do in this situation? Have you found this? And I'm really struggling with this. What would you recommend? I wouldn't survive if it wasn't for that level of consultation with other people who I perceive as being, even if it's one day ahead of me on this thing, we've got to learn from each other. Otherwise, I wouldn't survive.
The danger is that we women can compare ourselves, though, and we can compare our children.
Easy to do that. But, I mean, in some senses, I've got an easy hand on this one, because when they're really playing up, I say, oh, they're adopted.
Cheating.
And I have the odd faux pas every now and again, particularly with my older one, when there's some behavioural challenges. I explain, I say, it's fetal alcohol syndrome, which is my older son's diagnosis. And then I have to qualify it, obviously, with he's adopted. And when you see people looking at you thinking, what, you're a binge drinker when you're a husband, and you sort of think, in my line of work, that's not the best kind of, personal marketing. So, in that sense, it's quite a sort of a unique story that, I just have to learn with them and through them, and the fact that they're adopted means that I have to kind of listen in and learn who they are even more.
Yeah.
I mean, Bekah, you're a stepmother as well, so that adds an interesting dynamic. And when we see stepmothers in films, that they're kind of portrayed as the kind of the wicked one, or the one So how have you tried to ensure that you don't get that label or that stereotype?
I'm not entirely sure I've been successful, but no. Do you know what? It's really, really hard. It's really hard because with your own kids, you have that. What I have discovered for myself, and again, I do think it varies, is that there's a degree to which my children are little mini me's. So I get them, because I know how their brain's thinking, because mine is thinking the same way. I know what will make them understand, because it would make me understand. And then I also have, I have 2 girls that have got my genes, and I've got 3 girls that don't. And the 3 girls that don't are, to a degree, like this complete mystery to me, because they think completely differently. They think more like my husband, and he's a mystery. So, so you sit there and you go, well, that's, but it just means I have to work harder. And I think there's that thing, isn't it? People talk about love. It's not an emotion, it's an action. And when it comes to children, it's even more so. And when it comes to stepchildren, you go, do you know what? I'm just going to have to love you even more, because that's the only way to make this thing work. And I'm going to choose to love you, even when it's hard, even when I don't get it, even when you don't get me, and we'll push on through. But it is hard sometimes.
Tune in to Woman with Maria Rodrigues, weekdays from 10:35 a.m, only on Premier Christian Radio, where faith comes to life.